Hi. Welcome to Luna Listens to Books channel. If you like my channel, please like and subscribe. Now the story begins. My uncle's family had occupied my house for 5 years without permission, and my mother, respectful of the fact that they were relatives of my late father, had been enduring this situation, but after repeated attempts to reclaim our property ended only in humiliation. She could bear no more. When I returned from studying abroad, I immediately sent a message to my uncle. Since you like living in my house so much, you might as well stay there for life. I called a locksmith, had the locks changed, and locked them inside. Let them truly enjoy living there. What are you doing, Abigail Olef? I warn you, don't mess around, or don't blame me should anything happen. No sooner had the message been sent than my uncle, fuming with rage, sent me a voice message. Hearing his threat, I didn't hesitate for a moment and immediately called a few bodyguards and a locksmith. My reaction filled my mother with concern. We can have a chat with him, no matter what, he is your father's brother. Hearing this, I simply shook my head and said, Mom, you see him as a relative, but he certainly doesn't consider you one. My uncle's family was poor, and 5 years ago, to enable my cousin to marry a wealthy heiress, they borrowed my villa to use as a marital home. With a villa as a marital home, the wedding went very smoothly. However, after the wedding, they claimed that it wasn't suitable for a newly married couple to move and asked us to extend their stay. Then they said that since my villa was empty anyway, I might as well let them live there, and they could help me take care of it. I made no objection to what they said back then. It was simply because my mother wasn't comfortable living in such a large house more often. She stayed in the small house we had before becoming wealthy. Usually, I spent most of my time abroad, so I let them stay and thought to have them move out when I returned home. But who'd have thought that after living there for 5 years, they would have an illusion that they were its owners. When my mother went to claim it back, they treated her like a beggar and drove her out. Previously, I was abroad and unaware of the situation. 3 months ago, I returned to the country, and occupied with work, I didn't have time to deal with it. Now that I'm home, seeing them living with unbearable arrogance in my villa, how can I tolerate it? After the bodyguards and locksmith arrived, I didn't mince my words or care whether there was anyone in the villa. I just said, change the locks, they want to live here, as they wish, I'll make them stay inside for a lifetime. At first, the locksmith hesitated, feeling that I was causing trouble. But when he saw the property deed in my hand, he hesitated no more and started changing the locks with his tools. In his view, since I was the homeowner, I had the right to dispose it in whatever way. What are you doing? How dare you mess around in my house? The commotion had alarmed the wealthy heiress, now my cousin's wife. She furiously yelled at the bodyguards and the locksmith. Your house, are you mistaken? Upon hearing my voice, she sized me up, then suddenly realized who I was, her face filled with scorn. So, you're Abigail, a Sigfred's shameless relative? It was bad enough when your mother came to make a scene a while ago, now you bring people over. Oh, you think you can do whatever you want just because you're Sigfred's relative? You really have no shame. Trying to get my husband's house by any means, having a relative like you is truly a curse. I was bewildered by her words. It was as if reclaiming my own house was such a shameful act. But I soon understood and why cousin's wife had been misled by my uncle's family and didn't know that I was the real owner of the house, which explained her anger. I scoffed, surveying her from head to toe, aware that news traveled fast among our circles. I knew all too well about her notorious deeds. Perhaps she didn't recognize me because I had only recently returned to the country and kept a low profile. Your husband's house? I said sarcastically. The bodyguards and the locksmith stopped their work, clearly confused about the situation. Just as I was about to tell them to continue working and ignore the woman, my cousin Sigfred came out of the house. His face was expressionless, his eyes filled with impatience. Abigail, have you caused enough trouble? His expression and words startled me. His wife didn't know it was my villa, but Sigfred certainly did. When my uncle's family had come to borrow my villa, they had cried pitifully. They said Sigfred couldn't get married and would be the last line of their family without a house, begging us to help no matter how. They promised they would never forget my kindness and that the house could be returned any time after the wedding. This villa was the first property my father had bought for our family, and it held a special place in my heart. I didn't want to lend it to anyone. I even warned them the wife they chose for my cousin was a bad woman, but they accused me of being stingy and unwilling to lend the house. Overwhelmed by anger, I lent it to them. After all, they were my father's relatives, and my mother also spoke on their behalf. Seeing their plight, I finally agreed. Now, my cousin's words made it seem like I had no right to come over. Was it the way they repaid my kindness? You've married and had a child, how much longer do you plan to stay in my villa? My question was a slap in his face. Even now, I was being very decent. Look at your shameless relative, coming over to snatch the house as if she has a reason. My cousin's wife was stunned at first, but thinking that my cousin wouldn't dare deceive her family, she responded irritably. As for my cousin, he was also very displeased, but before he could react, my uncle and aunt rushed back from outside. Abigail, have you lost your mind actually bringing people here? My uncle and aunt cursed. They probably never expected me, a young girl, to act so decisively. Perhaps they thought I would be as meek and easily manipulated as my mother. I looked at him coldly. Did you really think I was joking? My uncle clearly didn't dare meet my gaze, hurriedly signaling my cousin and his wife to go inside, saying he would handle things here himself. Before my cousin's wife went in, she couldn't help but complain about having such relatives, calling it bad luck. Hearing this, I laughed in anger. Who's the unlucky one? I kindly offered the villa for you to stay, and now I'm the villain? Had I known this would happen, I would have left the villa empty for rats and cockroaches rather than lend it to such ungrateful people. Uncle, you better sort this out quickly and move out, or I'll take the property deed to the police station. Move out before it gets ugly. I shook the property deed in my hand, and my uncle, previously furious, suddenly forced a smile. Abigail, we're all family, why make it so unpleasant? Family, huh? Now you remember we're family. When my mom came to discuss this matter not long ago, not only did they keep their doors shut, but they even called the property security to drive her away. They called my mom a beggar and said to never let her in again. My mom argued with those people and even fell and hurt her arm, and now she trembles when picking things up. Uncle, when my mom came to find you, your family was utterly heartless. I looked at him coldly. Shall I also have the security throw your entire family out? My aunt, hearing this, quickly grabbed my hand, saying it was a misunderstanding, that they hadn't seen clearly who it was. They seemed to know they were in the wrong and apologized with a smile. Abigail, come inside and sit down to talk. Just as I approached the door ready to enter, my cousin's wife's disdainful voice came again. Mom, what are you doing, bringing anyone home? What if they steal our stuff? My cousin-in-law made no attempt to hide her disdain. Instead, she raised her voice intentionally when she spoke to me. It was clear she was implying I was a theft. It's quite funny, I'm back to my own home, yet I have to bear being accused and get permission. What a joke. Maybe I won't even bother going in, I'll just talk to the property security. I had seen what kind of people my uncle's family were. Talking to them was just a waste of time. My cousin-in-law was about to say more, but my uncle quickly scolded her. How can you talk to Abigail like that? Apologize to her right now. With a cold snort, she simply turned her head away. Abigail, please sit down. We're all family here. Why make things so tense? His words meant bullshit to me. If they truly considered us family, they would never treat my mother so poorly. They only remember we are family when they need something from me. And why? Gaze swept through the house, and my mood grew increasingly worse. The place was a mess, wrecked by the kids' walls covered in scribbles, furniture battered, and the floor uneven. I had personally overseen the decoration of this villa, taking care of every detail myself. Seeing it in this state, I couldn't help but feel enraged. What's going on here? What do you mean, what's going on? It's just normal wear and tear. What's wrong with you, coming here to criticize? My cousin-in-law rolled her eyes as she spoke. Rude and ignorant, you think just because you're related you own the house too? Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh. It hit on me, just because we're related, they think I should tolerate being mistreated and my mother being humiliated? Seeing my displeased expression, my aunt quickly pushed my cousin-in-law, coaxing her upstairs with a gentle voice. Only after my cousin-in-law had reluctantly gone upstairs did my uncle and aunt turn to me with pleading faces. "Abigail, we were wrong, please, let us stay a bit longer." At that moment, my uncle looked nothing like the arrogant man on the phone when I agreed to let you move in. "I told you nothing here should be damaged." I watched them coldly, although I had prepared myself before coming. Seeing the house in such a terrible state still pained me. Seeing my indifferent expression, my aunt began to cry and complain. "It's the kids doing, you know, the kids' behavior is hard to control," she exclaimed. "Abigail, my grandson has gotten used to living here. Could you give us a bit more time? If we move now, not only will it upset him, but my daughter-in-law will divorce my son." Although I had never really interacted with my cousin-in-law, I knew her situation well enough. She was a wealthy heiress who had disdained my brother at first. However, for reasons unknown, her family rushed to arrange a marriage for her, and upon learning that my cousin owned a villa, they married her off to him without a second thought. After the wedding, she didn't go to work and became a full-time housewife. Though she was called a housewife, she did nothing at home, leaving all the work to my aunt. She barely took care of her child, leaving that to my uncle and aunt as well. She spent money lavishly and often went out to enjoy herself, causing my aunt's family to frequently borrow money to get by. Being thrown out would definitely lead her to abandon her husband and child, resulting in a broken home. I was well aware of all this, but what did it have to do with me? My family had helped them considerably. Just as I was about to speak, my mother called and asked me not to escalate the situation for the sake of family ties. It turned out my aunt had begged my mother to show them mercy for my deceased father's sake. When they brought up my father, it always softened my mother's heart. Reluctantly, I agreed. 10 days, if you don't move out within 10 days, I'll come make sure you do. I told them. Upon hearing this, my uncle and aunt were overjoyed, thanking me profusely, praising the reliability of family in crucial times. I had thought my concession would make them grateful, yet, far from appreciating it, they only became more outrageous. On the 8th day, seeing no signs of them moving out, I visited them again. I was greeted, as usual, by my uncle and aunt's pleas and tears. They kept saying how hard life was and that, as family, I shouldn't push them to desperation. This time, I stood firm, insisting they leave within the set deadline. My uncle's face fell clearly. He hadn't expected me to be so resolute. My aunt, however, quickly pulled me inside, suggesting we eat first and talk later. As I sat at the table, my cousin's wife immediately scowled and coldly said, "Be careful, the dinnerware is very expensive, you couldn't afford to replace it." I felt a surge of displeasure upon hearing this. I had once admired such fine porcelain and had specifically bought some for my home. Each piece was worth a few $1,000s. I didn't even get the chance to use them, but they did. It was infuriating. The villa was a mess, and my cousin's son was running around with something in his hands. Frowning, I saw that he was holding a stuffed toy, my cherished birthday gift from my father when I was a child. I had even designated a room in the villa to store such precious items. Before my uncle's family moved in, I had expressly warned them not to touch anything in that room. Clearly, they hadn't listened. "Who allowed you to touch my things?" I snatched the now cotton-exposed toy from his hands, glaring furiously at my uncle. The child immediately began to cry, kicking and hitting my legs, while my cousin's wife cursed loudly at me. "Dad, what's wrong with you, bringing this ill-mannered bumpkin home all the time?" Ill-mannered. The irony of her words made me want to laugh. They were squatting in my villa, insulting my mother, and tampering with my belongings. Was this their idea of manners? "You talk to me about manners, fine, let me teach you what manners are." No sooner had I spoken than I slapped my cousin's wife across the face. My long nails left a scratch across her cheek, drawing blood. "Ah!" A scream echoed through the villa. "You lowlife, how dare you hit me, you're dead." My cousin's wife lunged at me with stretched hands, but before she could reach me, I grabbed her by the hair and threw her to the ground. "Abigail, have you lost your mind?" My uncle and aunt finally reacted, cursing at me loudly. They probably hadn't expected me, a seemingly weak woman, to suddenly lash out. "Lost my mind?" I scoffed, shaking my head. I'm just teaching you what manners are. Madwoman, Dad, call the property security to deal with this shameless creature. My cousin-in-law roared in frustration, and I agreed with her. It's high time we call the security to throw you out. Having you stay in this villa is truly nauseating. My uncle, who had just been about to make the call, immediately put his phone away after hearing my words. They could only act tough in front of me, but if the property security came, they would kicked out without doubt. After all, I was the true owner of this villa. Mom and Dad, I got hit, and what are you waiting for? My cousin-in-law shouted in vexation. We're all family and air our dirty laundry, my aunt said. Her face looked awful. She dared not scold the wealthy heiress directly, instead trying to soothe her gently. My uncle, unable to control his temper, spoke harshly, go upstairs, you never work but cause me trouble every day. My cousin-in-law's eyes widened in disbelief, probably never expecting her in-laws to side with an outsider and talk to her with such a tone. Fuming, she stormed upstairs, you all just wait. Upon hearing this, my aunt quickly followed her. Left downstairs, my uncle flashed a placating smile. Abigail, your father and I are brothers. There's no need to make things so complicated. I watched his disgusting smile and sneered internally. Brothers, probably he would only think of my dad at such a time. When he took over my villa and hurt my mother, had he ever thought of my father a bit? No. Look, you even hit your cousin-in-law out of anger. Now that you've vented, why not just let us stay in the house? Otherwise, if it really comes down to it, you hitting someone could land you in jail. Ah, so that was what he was after. No wonder he suddenly recovered his composure, but since I dared to strike, it was with full preparation. I smiled and then took out my phone. Then I'll just call the cops to handle this. You move out, I go to jail, fair enough. At this, my uncle panicked. Abigail, have you no regard for feelings? We're family. You're really driving us to a dead end. Do you need to see us destroyed before you're satisfied? While he wailed and knelt down, I was glad I hadn't brought my mom. If she saw this, she might have softened immediately. What do you mean by driving your family to a dead end? If I hadn't lent you the house, your son probably wouldn't have even been able to get married. Not knowing how to be thankful is one thing, but to repay kindness with enmity. However, just as I was about to speak, my cousin stormed in furiously from outside, wielding a stick and aiming it right at me. My cousin, who had been at work, hurried back home after receiving a call from his wife. Upon arriving, he saw his father kneeling before me and could no longer restrain himself, striking me directly. Having lived abroad where the security situation was somewhat precarious, I had picked up a few self-defense moves over 2 years. Nevertheless, as a grown man, my cousin managed to push me to the ground despite my efforts to evade him. Fortunately, I had anticipated such a situation and brought a bodyguard with me. The bodyguard quickly helped me up and subdued my cousin in front of me. My cousin's wife, who had been watching triumphantly from upstairs, panicked at this turn of events. What are you doing? She exclaimed. Before she finished her sentence, the bodyguard had already brought her downstairs. I looked at my cousin, now forced to kneel by the bodyguard, and stepped on his groin, causing him to collapse and scream in agony. Watching him writhing on the ground, I felt conflicted. Although we were cousins, we were not close. Yet, during his times of need, I had lent him a house and, when his wife's spending habits left him unable to afford living expenses after their marriage, I had used my connections to secure him a well-paying, easy job, all out of consideration for our family ties. Logically, he should have been the most grateful to me. Yet, here he was, not only refusing to return my house but also attacking me as soon as he entered. Watching his son being beaten, even my uncle could not stand by any longer and was about to strike me. However, at that critical moment, several police officers led by the property management stormed in. I was quite surprised. I had intended to settle this family matter privately, but it seemed my uncle's family had chosen their own demise. You've arrived just in time, take this madman away, my cousin's wife shouted upon seeing the officers, immediately making it clear who had called the police. She seemed to think this was the end for me. This person, taking advantage of being our relative comes to harass us every now and then, shamelessly trying to take our house and even attacking us. The police officers, furrowing their brows, looked at me. They found it hard to believe that I, who appeared so quiet and demure, could do such things. "What's going on?" the police officer asked, looking at me. I calmly explained, "This family has taken over my villa, today I came to reclaim it, but they refused," and then a fight broke out. "Nonsense, you're daydreaming, poor and pathetic, you could never afford this house in your lifetime." My cousin's wife immediately started cursing furiously, visibly agitated. I watched her ranting, then looked at her mockingly and slowly pulled out the property deed from my bag to show the police. "Here is my deed, and also, my name is registered with the property management, and the Property Rights Center can verify the details." Upon hearing this, my cousin's wife became even more upset. "We have a deed too, Dad, quickly bring it out," she clamored, but my uncle just stood there looking troubled and clearly unable to produce it. In fact, he did have one, but it was a fake he had made to deceive my cousin's wife. It was only good enough to fool her, especially since she was in a rush to get married for some reason and hadn't looked closely at the document. Now, faced with professionals, he dared not present it. "He can't produce it," I said lightly, watching my cousin's wife. "I bought this villa, and I paid for the renovations, I even got your husband his job. In other words, you're living off me, you've been able to stay here this long only because of my mother's kindness." Hearing this, my cousin's wife immediately started shouting that it was impossible, desperately questioning her husband. Seeing how complicated the situation was, the police decided to take us all to the station. The house issue was the simplest to resolve, they just needed to check the records. The most pressing issue now was the assault. My uncle's family, seeing an opportunity, clung to the accusation that I had started the fight. Now that their son hurt, they demanded a solution. "Yes, she must pay, or else lock her up," my aunt burst out, unable to contain her fury. She truly despised me. To this, I simply smiled and, in front of them, pulled out a lawsuit from my bag and handed it to the officials. As I produced the lawsuit, not only was my uncle's family shocked, but even the staff couldn't believe their eyes. "Did you draw a lawsuit in such a short time and get ready to provide evidence?" It seemed they couldn't grasp that someone as ordinary looking as me could be so capable. When my uncle's family heard me say yes, they protested. "Don't listen to her nonsense, her evidence must be flawed." However, they weren't the ones to decide. The staff took my evidence and started investigating right away. And sure enough, they discovered there was indeed a problem. The surveillance I provided showed that I acted in self-defense when my cousin struck me with a stick. Of course, I knew my evidence was impeccable first, because it was my own house. I knew exactly where the cameras were positioned. Second, as a law student, I knew how to protect my rights. This completely deflated my uncle's family. They stared at me with wide, unblinking eyes, and even the staff seemed rather helpless. "Why did you even provoke her?" "Now, the only option is private settlement and negotiation based on compensation based on injuries assessed, but remember, her injuries are much more severe than yours. It looks like you'll be the ones paying." My uncle's family was utterly dumbfounded. And yet, I was clear-headed. Although I had struck back, I was still a girl with limited strength. It was impossible for me to have seriously injured my cousin. "Are you mistaken? She came looking for trouble, and now we have to pay her? Paying is the least of your worries. She refuses to settle, you might even spend a few days in detention." The staff explained, while I chose without hesitation not to settle, I wasn't short of money, and they needed to be taught a lesson. Initially resentful towards me, my uncle's family, upon hearing this, started crying bitterly in front of me, pleading for my mercy. I refused to let them off, and they turned to plead with my mother, who had just hurried over. Why, mother is a tender-hearted person, and with my uncle's family putting on a pitiful act, even mentioning my father who had passed away many years ago. She hesitated again, her gaze shifting towards me. Often, I felt that she was weak and too easily bullied, but as her daughter, I had no choice but to agree. With the staff's intervention, I did not ask for compensation. However, they had to move out of the villa within half a month, or the police would personally handle it. This worked out for us. It was also good news for my uncle's family. After all, they could stay another half-month. As we left the police station, my uncle and aunt, with feigned gratitude, clung to my mother, thanking her. They said how lucky they were to have relatives at crucial times. I watched coldly from the side, clearly sensing that things wouldn't go that smoothly. From what I knew of them these past few days, it was obvious they were harboring ill intentions. Upon returning home, I immediately contacted Aldrich Ayala. He helped secure Sigfred's job. Since Sigfred was ungrateful and even hit me, he didn't deserve the job. Over the years, I had built enough connections to handle such matters. Hearing my situation, Aldrich couldn't help but laugh. "I can't fire him just yet," he said. "Is that a problem?" I asked. "Not really," he replied. "He frequently abuses his position for personal gain. If it weren't for you, I would have dealt with him long ago. Since he's so ungrateful, let's just send him to jail." I thought about my mother. She would plead for Sigfred if he had to face jail time, so the revenge was unnecessary. In the end, I shook my head. "Tell me how much he's embezzled, and I'll make it up to you through future projects," I said. "Deal," he agreed. I thought my goodwill, at the very least, would lead them not to bother me and my mom, yet they were cheekier than I expected. On the 7th day after leaving the police station, I had just finished shopping and returned home when I heard a commotion in the living room. "Jasmine, think about it. Abigail is a girl, and my brother has passed away. What will you do when you're old? You might as well give us the villa, and we'll have Sigfred take care of you too in your old age." I was fuming outside the door, having long suspected that this family was no good, but I hadn't expected them to be so shameless. "What nonsense are you spouting? If you keep bad-mouthing my daughter, don't blame me for cutting ties with you." When it involved me, my mother became tough and fired back. However, my aunt thought nothing of my mother's words and continued, "Jasmine, I know you're upset, but this is the reality. Abigail is a girl, and besides, she studies law and can't take over the family business. It would be better for you all if Sigfred managed the company." They even dared to aim for my father's inheritance and the company. "You should think about her. She can't manage a company. What will you do then?" Hearing this, I couldn't hold back my anger anymore. I pushed the door open and stormed in. "Abigail, you're back. Come, sit down." My uncle wore an embarrassed expression, clearly worried that I had overheard him. "Relax, I'm just grabbing something." I forced a smile at him, then ran to the bedroom and came out with a gun. "Abigail, what are you doing?" Seeing me with the gun, my uncle's face turned pale with fear. "What am I doing?" I walked towards him, laughing coldly. "You're eyeing my dad's legacy, so it's only natural for me to take the gun in self-defense. But be careful, if this gun accidentally hurts you, you would really be in trouble." Terrified, my uncle and aunt didn't dare to stay a moment longer. They scurried out of my house as fast as they could, cursing me as a lunatic while they ran. "Abigail, are you okay?" My mother was visibly shaken by the situation, looking at me anxiously. "I'm pretty fine." I waved my hand to reassure her that I was in a great mood. "You'd best cut ties with my uncle and his family. Relatives, bullshit, they only see you as their relative when they want your money." My mother had known their true nature long ago. She was just too soft-hearted. Back in my room, I called Aldrich and asked him to gather all the evidence against my cousin and hand it over to the police. I had intended to leave them a way out, but they didn't appreciate it and even stepped up their harassment. Did they really think I was easy to bully? Also, I find a few more people to check on my uncle's family thoroughly. Okay, I'll send the details over once I've sorted it out. After hanging up, I finally went to have dinner, satisfied. Aldrich was incredibly efficient. In just 4 days, he sent me a bunch of messages that got me really excited. His family were all troublemakers. Not only was my cousin Sigfred embezzling, but his wife was cheating, and even their child might not be his. My aunt flirted with men when going for a walk in the park every day. Birds of a feather flocked together. Once such information got out, their family would probably fall apart. But I didn't care at all. After all, they had wanted to devour my family's property and tear us apart directly. half a month later, at the agreed time, I brought the materials to the villa. Coincidentally, my uncle's entire family was there. However, they didn't seem like they wanted to return the house. When they saw me coming, none of them had pleasant expressions. My cousin and his wife were not in good spirits, clearly having argued frequently over the villa recently. You know, with my help, my cousin's salary was actually quite decent, yet it still wasn't enough to cover his wife's spending, which led him to exploit his position for extra earnings. "Abigail, why have you come alone? Where's your mom?" they asked. "She values family ties and didn't want to argue, so she didn't come, just hurry up and move out," I said bluntly, not caring about their feelings. As soon as I finished speaking, they began to complain, begging for more time. "Abigail, look at my child, still so young. What are we supposed to do if we move out? He's used to this place, maybe you could wait a bit longer." Hearing this, I couldn't help but show a disdainful expression. I had no affection for this child who had damaged my belongings. What does that have to do with me? What if he likes living in the Eiffel Tower? Does that mean it should belong to you? My irony made their faces look like crap. My cousin's wife started hitting and kicking him, threatening to divorce him today if they couldn't resolve this situation. The adults were making a scene, and even the child began to mimic them, shouting about divorce. My cousin looked miserable, was inept, and had even hit me before, leaving him clueless about what to do now. "Abigail, please, for the sake of our whole family, just give us a few more days." My aunt shamelessly threw herself on the ground, playing the victim. "Are you trying to kill us? Would you be satisfied only if I died? We are relatives after all. When you were abroad, we took care of your family." Hearing this, I was speechless. "So I'm the villain for asking you to return my house?" And her claim that they took care of my family sounded like a joke. Their family only approached my mother when they needed money. From the beginning until now, they hadn't repaid any money. And now they dare bring this up? "Emery, what are you doing lying on the ground?" The noisy voices continued, and looking around, I saw quite a few people in the villa. These were neighbors friendly with my aunt. Today, to stop me from evicting them, she had deliberately called a crowd to the house. "This heartless girl, she wants to drive us out of our home. How miserable my life is," my aunt wailed, instantly causing the crowd to point fingers at me, calling me shameless. They even said I disrespected my elders and was ill-bred. Hearing these accusations, I erupted. "All right, you want to make a scene, I'll give you a scene. Everyone, quiet down for a moment, I have something to say." I cleared my throat before finally speaking up. "They've been squatting in my house for 5 years now. Initially, I lent them the villa out of pity, but who could have imagined they would shamelessly try to take it over?" The crowd, upon hearing this, each showed a look of surprise on their faces, clearly unaware of these matters. In their eyes, my aunt was the rightful owner of the house. My aunt's face turned extremely ugly as she cursed loudly. "Nonsense! You ungrateful girl, you begged us to look after the house, you even said you'd give it to us. What a lunatic!" I looked at her like looking at an idiot. Not for having pressing matters to attend to, I would have slapped her right there. "We've reported these matters to the police, and they will be here shortly to handle this. She called you here just to use you as pawns to make me look bad." The crowd looked at each other, clearly unable to react immediately. However, the next moment, an old man stepped forward. "You're talking nonsense, and Emery are such good friends. One know very well what she's like. If you keep causing trouble, you won't get away with this." One spoke and the others echoed, all seeming ready to give me a hard time. I watched the man, my lips curling into a faint smile. "Your name is Alien Stone, right? So what if it is? I'm not afraid of your threats," the old man declared righteously, coldly snorting. I didn't want to waste any more time with him and pulled out a small stack of printed photos from my pocket, throwing them over. "You are my aunt's lover. I can understand why you would speak for her, but I really don't know why the rest are doing this." As soon as these words were out, my uncle immediately panicked, hurriedly picking up the photos. They were of Alien and my aunt going to a motel, which I had Aldrich secretly obtain. Instantly, my uncle's face turned livid with emotion, grabbed Alien and started beating him, filling the place with screams. Meanwhile, my aunt stood there frozen, too nervous to speak. Who would have thought at her age, she'd still have to suffer such embarrassment? Abigail, what exactly do you want? My cousin clenched his fists, feeling deep hatred for me, the destroyer of his family. Just for a house, do you have to make such a fuss? Don't you consider us family anymore? Hearing his words, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Now you consider me family, you stole my house, bullied my mother, and even coveted my family's company. Did you ever think of me as family when you did all that? As I spoke, I walked over to my cousin's wife and cheerfully ruffled the child's head. This child doesn't look anything like you, does he? The moment these words were spoken, my cousin's wife's face changed completely, and she pushed me away. What do you mean by that? My cousin said, his expression turning hostile. He clearly wanted to hit me, but was wary of the bodyguards behind me and my status as a law student. I didn't answer him, instead pulling out another stack of photos from my bag. These were surveillance photos of his wife and another man at a hotel. I handed one to my cousin, and the rest were passed around to the neighbors. With neighbors gathering here, it was just fitting to share the gossip. You're framing me. I didn't. My cousin's wife became frantic, desperately trying to explain to my cousin. Framing? I have even more scandalous photos, want to see them, but they're not free. The kid's not your son, poor you, working hard outside to support your cheating wife and someone else's son. My cousin could no longer contain his rage and slapped his wife, sending her to the ground. You wretch, I work hard to earn money, and you dare to cheat on me. My cousin-in-law couldn't take it anymore. She stood up and slapped him. Siegfried, you dare hit me and speak to me like this? The two began to fight, while the child next to them clapped his hands and chanted, be a cuckold, be a cuckold. The surrounding neighbors didn't know what to say. They hadn't expected this family to have so much gossip. As for me, I didn't care at all. They brought this upon themselves. I checked the time. The police would be arriving soon. Sure enough, soon a car drove into the neighborhood, and a few police officers got out and directly asked who Siegfried was. This is my family matter, stay out of it. Siegfried's face fell. He thought the police were here because he hit his wife. Handcuff him. The officer handcuffed my cousin straight away. You are suspected of corruption and bribery in your position, please come with us. Upon hearing this, my cousin's face froze, and he looked at me in disbelief. Clearly, he had figured out it was my doing. Abigail, let me go, I don't want your house anymore, please spare me. But the police didn't listen to him and took him away. My uncle and aunt, realizing what was happening, ran to me begging to spare their son. Sadly, I wasn't as soft-hearted as my mother. That very day, my uncle's family's belongings were moved out of the villa, and the property management put them on a blacklist, banning them for life. It took me a long time to restore the villa to its original state. As for my uncle's family, I heard from my mother that they were not doing well. Although my uncle and aunt didn't divorce, they fought all the time. Later, it was discovered that Alien had ALDS and had my aunt, who then infected my uncle. As for my cousin-in-law, her family was wealthy. She had only chosen my cousin as an easy target to secure a father for her unborn child before the truth came out. Who knew the villa was a sham and my cousin dared to hit her? Her family had made connections in prison to ensure my cousin was well taken care of. Their family was completely broken. I had no regrets. If I hadn't been firm, my father's inheritance might not have been secured. Today's story is over. Thank you all for listening.